Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into some really fascinating research.
We are indeed.
It's a paper called MAGI, Multi-Agent Guided Interview for Psychiatric Assessment. And what's so compelling, I think, is how it explores using AI, specifically large language models, for psychiatric interviews. A really complex area.
Absolutely. Complex and incredibly sensitive.
So for you listening, think of this as your chance to really get up to speed quickly on what looks like a significant advancement in AI for mental health care.
Yeah, and the paper starts by highlighting a key problem, doesn't it?
It does.
That current LLMs, while amazing at general conversation, well, they don't really align well with the very structured protocols used in psychiatry.
Like the MIN-I, the Mini International Neuropsychiatric Interview.
Exactly like the MAGI. That's a gold standard, but LLMs kind of improvise too much, maybe, or they don't follow the specific logic needed.
Right, and these structured interviews, they're the bedrock, but they take time, trained professionals, resources. It creates a real access problem.
A huge bottleneck.
So this research, this MAGI framework, it's presented as a potential way through that. It's a multi-agent system designed to basically automate the MNI.
Turning that clinical logic into a computational workflow, it's ambitious.
Definitely. So stick with us, because understanding how MAGI works and its potential impact, well, there are some real aha moments here for anyone interested in where AI is heading.
Okay, so maybe we should first set the stage a bit more, the context.
Good idea. The global challenge of mental health disorders, it's massive.
It really is. And getting a timely, accurate diagnosis is just fundamental.
And interviews like the MNI, they provide that systematic way to assess conditions based on established criteria, like the DSM-5.
Right, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. But as you said, they're resource intensive. Running one properly takes skill and, importantly, time.
Which limits how many people can actually get that assessment. It's a major barrier to care.
Precisely. So MAGI isn't just an AI exercise. It's aimed at a very real-world problem of accessibility and efficiency in mental health care.
Okay, so the paper argues current LLMs aren't quite cutting it for this specific task. They identify 3 key problems or mismatches.
Yeah. 3 fundamental issues. The first one is about sticking to the diagnostic rule book.
The diagnostic framework deviation.
Exactly. LLMs might chat effectively, but they often struggle to consistently apply the criteria from something like the DSM-5.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to differential diagnosis telling similar conditions apart.
That requires very specific structured reasoning, which isn't necessarily in LLM's default mode.
Not at all. The second mismatch they point out is about the interaction itself.
Rigid interaction pattern.
Yes. A lot of AI systems have this very inflexible way of asking questions. One size fits all.
Which just doesn't work well if someone's feeling distressed or confused or needs clarification. Good interviewing is adaptive.
It has to be empathetic and responsive. If the AI just plows ahead with a script, it's not going to be effective or, frankly, very helpful for the person.
And the third point.
Transparency, or rather the lack of it.
The black box problem.
You get a potential diagnosis, but how did the AI arrive at it? What was the reasoning? Without that insight, it's really hard for clinicians to trust or properly utilize the output.
Okay, so these are the challenges MGI is designed to tackle head on.
Right. And the core idea is this multi-agent framework. It's not just one big AI. It's 4 specialized agents working together, guided by the clinical logic of the MAGI.
4 agents. Can we walk through that? They give an example in the paper, right? With feeling hopeless.
They do. So imagine a participant says they feel hopeless. Instead of just noting it down, the MGI system kicks into gear.
The first agent steps in.
Yes, the navigation agent. Its job is to follow the MNI structure, its branching logic.
Yeah.
So after hopelessness, it knows to ask about duration, maybe appetite changes, sleep patterns, following that predefined path.
So it ensures the interview covers all the necessary ground in the right order.
Correct. It keeps the process systematic and aligned with the MNI protocol.
Okay, so let's break down these 4 agents properly. First, the navigation agent. We've touched on it. It's the guide.
It's the conductor, maybe. It manages the flow based on that MINI interview tree. It ensures that even if the conversation drifts, crucial diagnostic questions aren't missed.
And it has specific protocols for serious issues.
Yes, it coordinates with the judgment agent, which we'll get to, especially for critical responses like suicidal ideation, to make sure those are handled appropriately according to the predefined pathways.
Got it. Agent number 2.
The question agent. This is where the conversational flexibility comes in.
So this isn't just reading MINI questions verbatim.
No, it's more sophisticated. It can probe for more detail. Could you tell me more about that? It can explain concepts if the participant seems unsure.
Like the weight change example they gave.
Exactly. Explaining significant weight change might mean clarifying it's like, a 5% change in body weight within a month for someone weighing 70 kilos, making it concrete.
That's helpful.
And it can provide empathetic responses, acknowledging distress. It tries to make the interaction feel more natural and supportive.
Does it adapt based on what's been said?
It does. The paper mentions rephrasing questions. Like, if someone mentioned losing interest in their usual hobbies earlier, the agent might ask specifically about those hobbies later, rather than a generic question about anhedonia. He uses the context.
Okay, that sounds much more like a real interview. What's the third agent?
The judgment agent. This one's working constantly in the background. Its role is real-time evaluation.
Evaluating the answers against the MINI criteria?
Precisely. It looks for direct matches, but also uses semantic understanding. Does the meaning of the response meet the criterion, even if the wording isn't exact?
What if the answer is vague?
It has a process for that. It might trigger the question agent to ask clarifying questions. If after, say, 5 attempts, the answer is still ambiguous, it can use a forced choice mechanism.
Forced choice.
Yeah, presenting the participant with specific options directly from the MINI criteria to ensure a clear, protocol-compliant answer is recorded. It prevents getting stuck on ambiguity while staying true to the MINI structure.
Clever. A balance between flexibility and rigor. And the final agent?
The diagnosis agent. This is where everything comes together. It synthesizes the information gathered and evaluated by the other agents.
And this uses that psycho-T process.
Yes, psychometric chain of thought. This is really key to MAGI's claim of transparency and clinical relevance.
Chain of thought. Like showing it's working.
Kind of, but specifically tailored for psychometrics. It involves 3 phases. First, symptom anchoring.
Anchoring.
It means translating each diagnostic criterion, say, for depression, into a multi-step validation logic. Does the symptom exist? Does it meet the time requirement? Are there exclusionary factors? It's very systematic.
Okay, much more than just pattern matching.
Definitely. The second phase is syndromal validation. Here, it checks if the collection of validated symptoms meets the overall DSM-5 requirements for a specific disorder. Like needing 5 out of 9 symptoms for depression, including 1 core symptom.
So it checks the big picture against the rules.
Correct. And the third phase, which is crucial for trust, is evidence binding.
Binding the evidence.
It creates an explicit audit trail. It links the final conclusions directly back to specific utterances in the dialogue and the validation steps taken by Psychot. You can see why the system thinks a criterion is met, based on what was said.
That sounds like the transparency that was missing from the black box approaches.
Exactly. It aims to make the AI's reasoning traceable and understandable, which is huge for potential clinical use.
Okay, so they built this complex system. Did they test it?
Oh, yes. Extensively. They ran a large-scale clinical validation study.
How large?
Over 1,000 participants, 1,002 to be exact.
Yeah.
Real-world participants.
Wow. And covering various conditions.
Major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety, social anxiety, and importantly, suicide risk.
And how did they check the accuracy? Who was the benchmark?
This is key. They used dual expert annotation. 2 independent licensed psychologists reviewed the interview data and made diagnoses based on the MINI criteria. That provides a very rigorous clinical ground truth.
So comparing MGI's output to experienced human experts.
Exactly. And results. MBI showed high agreement with those expert diagnoses. Plus, crucially, it generated those transparent diagnostic traces we just talked about via Psycho-T.
So high agreement and explainability, that's promising.
Very. But they didn't just look at the final diagnosis. They also evaluated the quality of the conversation itself.
How did they do that?
They compared MBI dialogues to dialogues generated by 4 other baseline LLM approaches. Things like just using an LLM to ask questions directly, or role-playing, or using its stored knowledge.
And experts rated these conversations.
Yes, on several dimensions. Relevance, did it stick to the topic? Accuracy, was the information gathered correct? Completeness, did it cover all necessary areas? And guidance, how well did it steer the interview?
And how did MBI stack up?
It generally performed better, especially on relevance and completeness. The researchers attribute this to the structured multi-agent approach, particularly the navigation and judgment agents keeping things on track.
Interesting. Any areas where it didn't lead?
It slightly trailed one baseline, the one using encoded knowledge on pure accuracy.
Oh.
But the paper suggests this might be a trade-off. MAGI prioritizes a more adaptive, participant-centered conversation, which might introduce slight variations, but they argue the Psychot reasoning framework compensates for this by rigorously checking the criteria later.
Makes sense. So better conversation flow, potentially at the cost of slight raw accuracy, but with a robust check at the end?
That seems to be the idea. Then they look specifically at diagnostic performance, using different underlying LLMs, GPT-4o, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and a couple of others.
And comparing standard setups versus Psychot.
Yes. Vanilla LLM, a basic chain of thought, and then MAGI with Psychot. The results were pretty clear.
Psychot came out on top.
Consistently, significantly outperformed the baseline configurations across the board, achieving clinically acceptable agreement levels, especially, and this is critical, in detecting suicide risk.
Why was it so much better?
The symptom anchoring and syndromal validation steps within Psychot seem key. That rigorous step-by-step checking really improves reliability compared to just letting the LLM make a judgment call.
And did it help less capable models?
That was another interesting finding. Even smaller models showed marked improvement when using Psychot. It suggests the framework itself adds a lot of value and can help bridge the gap between different base model capabilities.
What about fine-tuning or giving examples? Few-shot learning.
They looked at that too. All methods improved with a few examples, which you'd expect. But Psychot showed more stable, consistent gains across the different disorders.
Suggesting it integrates that clinical knowledge more robustly.
That's the interpretation. It learns effectively, but systematically. Interestingly, the simpler methods got a huge boost for social anxiety detection with just a few examples.
Why social anxiety specifically?
The paper suggests it might be because social anxiety can manifest in really varied ways, so having concrete examples helps the basic models a lot. But overall, Psychot proved very strong, particularly for the structured approach needed for something like suicide risk assessment.
They also included some visualizations, right? Heat maps.
Yes, figure 3. It shows where interaction happens within the interview structure for different disorders. You see different patterns. Some sections require more back and forth. Some trigger the forced choice option more often.
So it visually confirms that a dynamic approach is needed.
Exactly. It's not a linear path. The system has to adapt based on the disorder and the individual's responses.
And they included a case study to show the explainability.
Table 4, a case of generalized anxiety disorder. It really walks you through how Psychot worked.
How so?
It shows how the agent clarified things, like the participant initially described worry as intermittent, but through probing, MGI established it met the 6-month duration criterion by looking at the cumulative experience.
So digging deeper based on the role.
Yes, and it shows how uncontrollability was confirmed. The participant mentioned trying self-help but still struggling. It maps specific phrases about stomach spasms to muscle tension criteria, links sleep complaints.
And connects it all back.
Explicitly. The case study demonstrates that audit trail linking dialogue snippets to validation steps to DSM-5 criteria. It's end-to-end traceability.
That seems incredibly important for responsible AI in this space. Speaking of responsibility, what about ethics?
They addressed that quite thoroughly. Rigorous ethical oversight was crucial.
Like IRB approval.
Yes, institutional review board approval,
Yeah.
informed consent from all participants, clear disclosure that NGI is not providing a clinical diagnosis itself, the right to withdraw at any time, and anonymized data.
What if someone showed distress during the interview?
They had a multi-tiered intervention protocol. If distress was detected or concerning content like suicide risk emerged, there were clear steps involving referrals to mental health resources and secondary evaluations by clinicians. Safety was paramount.
And data security.
Strong measures. They also emphasized the boundaries. The AI analysis wasn't directly shared back to participants as a diagnosis.
Right.
Actual clinical diagnoses are always made by qualified professionals. No data transfer to third parties.
Good. So it sounds impressive, but no research is perfect. Did they mention limitations?
They did. They acknowledged the need for longitudinal studies, tracking outcomes over time, and testing with more diverse populations, different cultural backgrounds, age groups, etc.
Makes sense. And future work.
Lots of directions. Enhancing Psychot to handle comorbidity multiple disorders at once better, improving the AI's ability to detect subtle emotional cues, and then the big challenges. Clinical integration, training professionals to use such tools, ongoing data privacy considerations.
So still work to be done, but a significant step.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's try to summarize the key takeaways from this deep dive into MAGI.
Well, I think the core advancement is this multi-agent framework successfully operationalizing a complex, structured clinical interview like the MAGI.
Doing it in a way that aims for clinical validity, keeps the conversation flexible, and crucially, offers transparent reasoning through psychotic.
Right. That combination is powerful, and the results showing significantly better diagnostic agreement compared to previous LLM methods is a major proof point.
It really feels like it could pave the way for AI to genuinely help ease the burden on mental health care systems, improving accessibility while maintaining clinical standards.
That's the potential, definitely. It addresses those core mismatches, framework deviation, rigidity, and lack of transparency in a very deliberate way.
So, thinking about the bigger picture, particularly for AI development, what MAGI demonstrates is quite profound, isn't it?
I think so. It shows that by combining the language capabilities of LLMs with carefully designed logic-driven structures like these coordinated agents, and the psychiatric reasoning AI can tackle highly specialized tasks demanding accuracy and explainability.
It's moving beyond just conversation to structured, domain-specific reasoning.
Exactly. Which leads to a really interesting thought for you, the listener, to ponder.
Okay, what's the provocative thought for today?
Considering the progress shown here with MGI in psychiatry, what other fields that rely on specialized human expertise, structured assessment, and transparent reasoning could be similarly transformed?
You mean where else could multi-agent systems built on principles like clinical logic and explainability make a real difference?
Yeah. Think about legal reasoning, complex engineering diagnostics, maybe even scientific discovery processes. Areas where structured knowledge and traceable logic are key.
It pushes you to think beyond just mental health to the broader implications of building AI that can reason transparently within specific expert domains.
Precisely. How far can this approach take us in augmenting human expertise? Definitely something to mull over.
A great point to end on. We definitely encourage you to check out the MGI paper if you want even more detail. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.